Hey guys, welcome to this new video. Today we're gonna talk about a hot topic: dating, meeting people, and more than that, getting married in Vietnam. And to dig into this subject, I invited a friend of mine, Giang, also
Hello.
Aurélien, to talk about this topic. We're gonna share personal experience, some kind of funny facts, as well as the knowledge you need to know if you wanna have long-term relationship and also get married in Vietnam. So thank you, Giang, to accept this interview. Maybe you can introduce yourself, tell us for how long you've been here and your story being here in Vietnam.
So I've been here 3 years already. I was born in here, but I was adopted by a French couple. So I came back first to visit Vietnam in 2015, and after a few trips, I decided to come settle here in 2018.
So before we talk more about dating and being married and being in a long-term relationship, let's just bring a little bit the idea. Is it easy to meet people as a foreigner in Vietnam?
Yes, it is. You just go to networking events. Also, my case is a bit specific because I'm kind of Viet Kieu, but at the beginning I didn't speak Vietnamese. But I have a kind of bonus place to meet local and foreigner. It was my orphanage, which is in Saigon. I used to go every week there, and it was really easy to me to meet new people, and they were really interested about my story. So that was my advantage. Yeah.
So going to networking events, you have a lot of events in different topics in Ho Chi Minh City and in other big cities in Vietnam. This is also something I invite you to consider if you just freshly arrive and if you want to gather with the local and the expat community. So you have also a specific district, for instance, Tao Dien
Yes.
or District 7, when you have the huge expat community. So you can also just pay a visit to those districts, and over there you will meet like-minded people and people maybe you want to connect with. Now let's talk a little bit about relationship and the topic of this video. How was it for you? Like from, let's say, dating up to being in the long-term relationship up to getting married? Can you explain a little bit how things was for you?
So me was very lucky meeting with my wife, which is now. So I met her a few months after I came to settle in here. I went out with some friends in a, let's say, nightclub, and I saw her. That fun fact, she first thought that I was Vietnamese, so she talked to me in Vietnamese because my wife, yes, she's Vietnamese. And I said, oh, sorry, I'm learning Vietnamese, I'm adoptee, so can we speak English? And I was very lucky because my wife spent 10 years already in Australia, and she just came back as well to settle in Vietnam. So yeah, we met like this, and after we exchanged our phone numbers, and we met the day after to have a proper chat. And after and so on, there was really a good connection. I used to know other Vietnamese girls in here, but let's say they were less prepared to engage and for commitment into a relationship.
Okay. Yeah, it's important because you will obviously have huge gap between our foreign perspective about relationship and this traditional and even very traditional society in
Yes.
Vietnam. Can we talk a little bit about that aspect? Like, what was the main differences between our foreign perspective and the current local
Yes.
way of how Vietnamese see the relationship?
I was very lucky because, as I said, my wife spent 10 years in Australia, so she was really open-minded, but her family is very Vietnamese and Saigonese. Let's say, first, I wasn't really able to enter a family house. It took me more than a year to just enter in the main room. After I was able to have a lunchtime at in the main room at a family house, and it was just after the wedding. So I married 2 years after meeting her. After the wedding, I was allowed to spend all day and also sleep at a family house.
Okay, yeah, it's interesting perspective because I had a similar story. It's like when I met my girlfriend First, when I visited her hometown, I used to sleep in a hotel. So it was like only the place I could stay during the night. And step by step, the more I got close to her and the more I got close to the family, the more I was kind of alone to stay in her place. So I remember first I was sleeping in a kind of the main room. So I had a small bed in the middle of the room. And then step by step, I could have my own room. So it's a funny fact that the house in the Vietnamese society and in their way of thinking is really something that they are kind of protecting, and it's really their own place. So the more you enter and the more you connect to those families, and the more they will kind of open you the door, and the more you will be allowed to go deep and connect more with them.
And also, I want to add, didn't settle together before the wedding.
Another important point is like if you start to date with someone in Vietnam, you will usually live in separate houses.
Yes, but she was allowed to sleep at my place.
Okay.
Yeah.
So her parents are more open-minded
than some.
Another fun fact about the Vietnamese perspective is, how was your first date?
So actually, my first date, I spent it in France, far from my wife. So it doesn't really count. But when they allowed me to enter their home, it was for the second date. So actually, they also take the advantage of it was the Tet period to let me enter the home.
Okay, so Tet, if you guys don't know, is the Vietnamese New Year, so it's different from our usual New Year. So this is a time where all the family, the big family, the extended family, with all the uncles, the grandparents will gather and have a big lunch, big parties. And as a foreigner, when you start to enter this Tet, this is when after you have also the first question, like when will you get married? I don't know if it was the same thing for you.
But actually, it was. We went for the wedding first in France, and we came back for the Tet period. And that time they allowed me to sleep as well at the home.
Okay, so different story, but the idea is the same.
It's the same, yeah.
So now let's talk a little bit about more the process, how it works when you wanna get married to a Vietnamese person. How it works in terms of the paperwork, in terms of the procedure you have to do as a foreigner.
Yes. So as French citizen, you have to go first to the French authorities. After they allow you to register in the Vietnamese one, and after you have to go back to the French authorities. So the first step, I take appointment with the consulate. They give me the paper as I'm a single and I allow to marry a Vietnamese citizen. After we go to Cô Mity district in Vietnam. So I was lucky because my wife is Saigonese. So I have some friends, their wife or the spouse is from a province in Vietnam, but they way close to Saigon, but the province depends on Hanoi. So they have to reach Hanoi to get the administrative paper, and that takes really more weeks or months longer, the process.
And actually, another question is like, how long it takes to get married in Vietnam, and how did you do everything?
So as I said, my wife is Saigonese, so it was quite easy. Everything is written online, really. We didn't need any agent, and us it takes 6 months, but because we did quite take our time, maybe say a few months, 3 or 4 months long, just the time to have the appointment at the French authority, the consulate, after go to the Vietnamese authority and go back to the French authority. Sometimes it's a bit of 1 week or 2 weeks waiting for get the paper. Yeah, but a few months.
Okay, so between 3 months to 6 months.
Yes, and maybe a few more months if your wife is from the province and have to go to Hanoi. I know some couple maybe it took 1 year.
Yeah, I have this story recently. Someone living in Sóc Trăng, so in the south,
yes.
And they belong to Hanoi, and the guy was like telling me that it was a pain in the ass to get to know the authorities there, to know like exactly which
place it depends of in the paper. And it's quite simple. It's just a bit long, but stay calm and no need an agent.
And then also the advantage is when you get married in the end, if you want to travel, how was the life before, when you were still with your girlfriend, and now when your girlfriend become your wife?
first, at the end of our first year relationship, we did apply her for a visa to visit France, but she failed because she also, let's say, entrepreneur, independent worker. So the French authority and Vietnamese one didn't accept visa application for France, and that was crazy because she has a Korean work permit, so it means it doesn't. There are really a few risks that she will go to France and stay in France and not come back Vietnam. But the first try for the visa was denied. Yeah, after the first year. So let's say it make us easy the decision for the wedding. Let's say we say, okay, the next time we will ask the wedding for France, we will ask during the wedding process. Make it easier for us.
Okay. Yeah, I heard that it may be complicated for Vietnamese if they want to travel overseas. They have to show bank statements and they have to show proof of employment. So, of course, if after you marry someone, it's going to make the travel easier for Vietnamese citizens. And I had similar experience about this when my girlfriend wanted to travel to France. We had to make a paper saying that we are her guarant. So if she did any mess in France, we are supposed to pay for everything that she's gonna do. So it's pretty tough to travel as a Vietnamese, and this is something you have to know if you are dating someone for a long period of time. And of course, you will want to travel with that person.
And that's crazy for my wife because also, she had a work permit for Korea, and also she spent 10 years in Australia. So that she was used to going abroad. But for France, it was really difficult.
And let's talk now about the advantages if you want to marry someone in Vietnam. What's the benefit you get as someone being married to a Vietnamese citizen?
So you have the residency as a spouse with a 3 years exemption visa. That's good. Me, before I was on the VietQ exemption. Is it just 6 months I have to renew? But it's quite easy. But I think for the the foreigners with no Vietnamese origin, it's a really a very interesting deal to have the spouse exemption visa. Of course, 3 years allow you some time to work as well, and it's a first step also to have a family book, because the family book of Vietnam is way different than in France. I have a French family book, but I don't have yet a Vietnamese family book because it's regarding to the property.
So as a foreigner, usually you get only 3 months visa that you can renew. It was before the situation that we know now about the pandemic. Let's see how things gonna turn after. Maybe there won't be any more this kind of visa. So of course, having long-term TRC, so temporary residency card through visa exemption, such as the spouse exemption, is something that a foreigner should consider if they want to have long-term plan living in Vietnam. Another important point is that when you get married, you will be able to invest with your spouse, right? Because the assets are common. Can you share a bit about that?
As I'm married under French and Vietnamese law, also we choose the classic French law that is 50-50. We didn't apply for a wedding contract, and if we change our mind to have a wedding contract, we have to wait 2 years regarding the wedding date. Also, as well for future project, for example, I will have the 50-50.
So as a foreigner, you can invest, for instance, in some specific projects in real estate. But let's say if you want to invest in the land, as a foreigner, you cannot. So having your wife, who is Vietnamese, and being married, of course, everything going to be shared. So even if your name is not exactly on the sawdust, on the paper of the land, you still, as a foreigner, kind of own half of the share. Half of this property.
And if unluckiness you have to divorce, you can claim.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. You can still go with a lawyer and go to the normal procedure, and that lawyer will be able to defend you and to prove you that you were also investing with your wife in this, for instance, in this land, and so you can get half of the value of that land.
I'm not worrying about that. I feel confident about that because also the wealth of my wife is equal to mine. I mean, it can be dangerous if you have a big gap, of course. So be careful about that.
So in the end, yeah, if you wanna, you can still have a contract if you wanna get married to a Vietnamese person. So you can do prenuptial contract, like similar as it works overseas. But of course, if you trust your partner, if you want something more clear and not having to write a paper before you get married, you can just use the common way foreigner get married in Vietnam. Thank you, Giang, for this sharing.
You're welcome.
So you are going back to France
Soon, yes.
Soon. So maybe we can discuss about you in a few months to see how was your return back to France, and as well as your wife's perspective of being in a foreign country with you.
Yes, and also since we married, the second application for the visa was super easy.
Okay.
The short stay, and we did just apply for a long stay visa, and as well it was really really fast, like 1 month process each time.
And let's say your wife wanna get after a few years the passport. How it works?
So first she has to register to the immigration and have the residency, and after 3 years waiting in France, you can ask the nationality, but 5 years overseas.
Overseas.
Yes.
Okay, and that person need also to learn French, or?
I don't know yet.
You know? Okay.
I guess so. I have a minimum level of French, but I will update you about that.
Your last word to invite the foreigner about dating tips?
Be honest. Be honest with your wife. I mean, your girlfriend. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Giang.
Thank you.
If you guys want to learn more about those topics, you can check in the description. I will leave some link, some resources, and maybe some a few tips so you can dig more into that topic if that's something that interests you guys. Thanks again, Giang.
Thank you.
And I see you in the next video.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Down and I'ma get it right, dead on sight like